Hey folks, Steve here with another Dark Valley video. Sorry it's taken me so long to get to recording another video. Things have just been really busy as they usually are, and so you end up having to wait a few weeks before I can actually get to playing anything, and there you go. I actually had to replace a light bulb before getting this thing going and moving some stuff around. I've been trying to reorganize the game room a little bit, and I'm not quite done. I'm going to have a fun time trying to do that. But I still got the game set up, as you can see, and it's still in the shape that we left it last time. So we're going to be heading into turn 13. And just as I get into that, as I usually do, I have a preamble of, what are we looking at here for the turn. And, this is the turn where the Axis will be officially launching Case Blue. We neglected or we deferred last turn to do that. I wanted to see what we could do to crack open the Soviet line first and then allow us to have sort of the follow-up actions for Case Blue, so we could pick the first two initiative chits. Now, there are some challenges that are existing right now in terms of, like, what do I want to do next, right? And to review the overall situation, which is just a good reminder for myself since I've been away from this for a couple weeks, we have had up here a breakthrough at Army Group Center, in the vicinity of Moscow, ahead of Smolensk there. And it might not be the end of the world yet, and the Germans can do something about that probably, but that's a dangerous position for them. Maybe the one nice thing that the Axis has is that now that we've captured Leningrad, I can potentially rail maybe some of those units that I was using to help besiege Leningrad and fill the gaps and try to do something to save the units that are kind of stuck in this position here. Now those guys right there in the center of that very narrow salient are Zoc locked. They can't get out of it. So the only thing I can really do is get some units around here and then maybe attack right here and thereby cutting off that assault or that shock army and that other army, maybe remove some units and salvage the situation. That may be difficult to do, but at this point we have to do it. We have to figure out something to save that situation, because if we end up in a case where now there's a hole in the German line, they have less capability to fill in the gaps once the Soviets get going, just because the Soviets have this replacement advantage. And it could be, a collapse of the situation, or, a cancellation of Case Blue in effect, because we're going to be too busy trying to reset a new line rather than make the gains that I'd like to make towards the Caucasus. Now, last turn, we had blown a hole through the Soviet line. We had spent, crucial movement, I guess, doing it so that I could create a nice big pocket here, and we were able to collapse that pocket in the isolation supply phase, where we removed a fair number of units. Now, those units will be probably effectively replaced with all the replacements that the Soviets are probably getting at this point in the game, but we've allowed ourselves to have a very clean hole here that we can look to exploit. Now we can bring up these infantry maybe to around here, and we can get all this armor going somewhere. And I think what I've been having trouble thinking about is, well, what do you do, right? The historical option is to, or in theory, what I would do if I was trying to really follow Case Blue in its intention would be to have these units come through here, and I would have a little bit of trouble, right? I would be wanting to go to Stalingrad, right? That's sort of a requirement. If I want to do the oil automatic victory, I got to go for Stalingrad. I've got a lot of problems that are going to be here in Stalingrad, because we've got all these Russian, they're just rifle divisions, but we've got units here across the Volga, right? So we can only really attack it from this side of the river. And by the time the Axis gets there, we haven't done the reinforcement phase and replacement phase for the new turn, so there will be units in Stalingrad. Very likely there I will have placed units in Stalingrad. So just knowing that's going to be a challenge. The other thing is, if I'm going for the oil victory, if I'm really trying to do this as a case blue situation, I'm also going to want to be snaking down this way, and I'm going to want to collapse Rostov, and I'm going to want to be wanting to go down here south and go off the map, right? I need to take Grozny off there in the corner over here. I need to take Maikop right here, and then I need to be sending as many mechanized units off the map as I can. Now, we still have plenty of turns to try to do that in. Obviously, it will get more difficult later in the turn because we're going to get the rainy season, or the muddy season, essentially. That's going to occur. We'll get a brief respite from that when the snow comes and freezes the mud, but then we're going to have the same problem that we had last winter when we were playing earlier in Barbarossa's scenario, where our operational momentum is just going to go away. And if we've not completed our goals for the oil victory, just like in history, we're going to be kind of spread out. Stalingrad's going to be a point of danger, and that's just assuming that I save the central or Army Group Center's precarious position, right? So this is, I guess historically, this is where the war is decided, right? If I make this gamble for the oil and I fail, and I end up losing a large number of units around Stalingrad, like happened historically, that might end up just eliminating my entire momentum, and then I'm going to be on the back foot, which wouldn't be a problem in 43 or 44, where the game sort of assumes I'm on the back foot, and then it's the Soviets who are trying to capture German territory and whatnot. But I don't know. That's just it's a tough decision. And you say, well, what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is to say, hey, oil rules, forget about it. We're going to do something else, right? Now, this is sort of I want to play this as the long game. If I'm playing just Fall Blau, and it's going to be over on a certain turn after 6 turns, so I guess turn 18 would be the final turn, potentially. Let's see, 12, 13, yeah, whatever. We need to control at least 37 victory hexes, with Maikop and Grozny counting as victory hexes. But if I'm trying to do this as the full campaign, and I'm still kind of entertaining that idea that I'd like to try this as the reigning campaign, what I could do instead is, I probably want Rostov anyway. I probably need Stalingrad, but I can deprioritize Stalingrad and maybe create my own line along this river, and instead do the opposite. And I can't remember if there was a German general who argued in favor of this or not, or what, but maybe instead we try to go up this way. Now, there's a huge amount of ground to cover here, but I'm trying to think of this in terms of where are the Soviet units, right? They're here, and then big gap, and then not a whole lot, and then some scattered units down here, maybe not a big deal. If I hold this, if I take Rostov, and I basically, have held that off to this degree here, I can be shooting for the rest of these all-important victory cities in the north. And there's, and I'm going to mispronounce all of these, Voronezh, there is Tula, obviously Moscow, and Kalinin, and then all these up here, which would be kind of hard to get to. But also, we still have Saratov way over here. The reason I'm bringing this up is, if I can go north instead, and I don't know how conceivable this actually is to do successfully, and this is what I'm trying to think about. Say that I do that. What I'm trying to think about is the concept of rolling up somebody's flanks. Now, this is not a Ancients game. This is not like a Napoleonic game. We're obviously speaking at such a high level operationally, but if we shifted the balance here a little bit and we tried to do localized isolations, we might be able to further create these big pockets along the line. Like, just as an example, if I can get some guys up around here, bust through here, and create a big pocket right here, and we eliminate those guys by the end of this turn. Now, that's probably not going to happen, right? I don't have enough movement to probably make that happen. But if I was able to do something like that in a turn or two, eliminate a bunch of units, and now the front line goes do, and then is somewhere over here, which kind of shortens the line a little bit. I've got to worry about whatever Soviet reinforcements are coming in here and here, but now I'm making it where the center, the Soviet center, is under pressure, now has to extend its own line this way. That saves Army Group Center a little bit, and now I'm pressing up against the Soviets. And something else that's kind of interesting about this, but I'm gonna have supply issues. I'm going to have supply depot issues because I'm not going to be able to get the supply to move that quickly, that far up. But something really important is that for the Soviets to get supply, they have to trace the rail lines off the east side of the map. And there are rail lines here, 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 and then, here, basically. So what do you want to do if you want to put everything in the north part of the map out of supply? It very specifically says the east part of the map, and if you're looking at the east edge of the map, that includes here. Right? That's the east part of the map. East part of the map. I love the sound effects, right? But here's the thing. There are rail lines that go off the north side of the map, but if I recall correctly, and I might have to double check the rules on this, but the Soviets can't trace supply off the north side of the map. That one or two rail lines that go up to Murmansk, they don't count for supply. They want you to trace off into Siberia, where the factories have been moved. Which means if at any point the Soviets can take control and block supply, basically here at Penza, and then anywhere along this line here through Gorky, if the Axis can take control of that, guess what happens? All of these guys effectively become out of supply, right? Wherever that line is that I can get to, I snake up this way. If I somehow were able to get up this way, all these go out of supply. I would likely be in a situation where these guys are isolated, and not everything would go poof right away, but essentially we would destroy the Soviet army. That's basically what would happen. And whatever would be left would be basically coming up off these reinforcement cities down here. But at that point, we will have taken control, basically, of all of these victory point cities up here, and that's enough to win, automatically. Now, I don't think we would automatically take control of all those VP points if we isolated this whole pocket. I think we would have to get units up there with Zocs. But at that point, with all these units gone, we for sure would have the ability to do that. That would not be terribly difficult. We would do that we'd do that at some point. Now, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get up there, right? And me as the Soviet knows that I would be trying to do that, so I would be plopping down reinforcements up here. It changes the game, right? So this is my critical decision point. Do I go north? Do I go south? What can I even do? And what's the likelihood that I can succeed in any of these things? So I need to think about that. I'm not sure how much of an answer I'm going to have for myself as I play through this turn, because I'm going to play through turn 13 here. But that's what's on my mind, and I'm sure, for the viewers who are watching, if you're familiar with this game, I'd like to hear your opinion on what should one do in this situation. I think, the chits are going to come up a certain way, and I'll just have to deal with that. But I can foresee a situation where if I make the right breaks in the line, I can just totally force the Soviets back into a reactive mode, like they ought to be during the summer of 42, and potentially have created a much better situation for myself. The other thing I don't have to worry about is this sort of rule where, like, you see this, like there are markers that you would normally use if we were playing the full campaign from the beginning, where, in 41 or in 42, you have to try to take some more objectives. I don't think we're constrained by that, playing the full campaign starting in Case Blue or in, summer 42, so, I don't know. We'll just have to play the game, I guess, but, this is where we're at. And we still have stuff going on down here, like taking Sevastopol, putting pressure down here. We don't want to give the Soviets an opportunity to create a big hammer down in the Caucasus by reinforcing down there. So, that'll be part of it. And at this point, with the movement rules and combat rules for the Volga, basically from here down to here will be always safe for the Soviets at this point, or nearly always safe. It'll be hard to crack that if I'm forcing the Soviets back to that point. But by then, I would have won the game as the Axis. So, okay, long preamble as usual, but I wanted, I'm trying to think through this situation, and in that operational East Front book that I've been reading, I'm at the Stalingrad chapter more or less, so it's timely and trying to figure out, what's the big strategic decision here. So. I'll put a cut in here, and when we come back, we'll start going through the sequence of play for turn 13. Okay, so we're going to look at the reinforcement and replacement phase. This should be relatively easy to get through. Now, for the Axis, they're not getting any reinforcements this turn. They're going to get some next turn, and I still have my counters for that in the baggie that I keep them in. I haven't brought them out yet, but they'll get some next turn. And I'm realizing as I'm looking at the counters left in baggies that I've not deployed to the map, the Axis really only has so many more reinforcements coming. So obviously they're really more concerned with the replacement phase at this point. The Axis replacements this turn, according to the replacement schedule, is on turns 13 through 17. Each turn we're going to get 4 German infantry steps per turn. So that's infantry. That is not, and I believe that's normal infantry. So it has to be typical normal infantry units, nothing specialized is my understanding, and it means we're not going to get anything for our mechanized forces. They're going to have to do what they can. Now, as I look at the map, there's a few areas that I think are probably worth popping a few units to full so that they project Zocs. That's going to be sort of over here. But then, we also have some spots that are around our problem area in Army Group Center that we're going to have to deal with. So not much to worry about there. I'll do that in a moment. And then just to speak to the Soviet reinforcements that coming this turn, what we're going to get, we actually get a few things. I won't show it on the map just because it's relatively straightforward. We're getting 2 armies. So 2 fresh armies, and we're also getting 2 armored corps, tank corps. And in terms of the replacements that we're getting this turn for the Soviets, let's see, we're getting the 5 for each of Leningrad. Well, they don't have Leningrad. They still have Moscow. They still have Stalingrad. And they still have Engels, I believe. I forget where Engels is on the map. There it is. Yes, they still have Engels. So that's still 15. Let's see. We're going to get 5 more due to off-map factories. So that's 20. And then we're going to roll a die. And we're going to see if we get a little bit more. Let's see here. Okay, so it looks like it's just a straight die roll. And it's 4. So we're going to have 24 24 replacement points for the Soviets, in addition to the reinforcements that we'll be getting. Basically, I foresee the need to rebuild some units, right? Now, the one thing is, we're going to have some restrictions on what we can replace according to the rules, right? Now, we can put infantry divisions and armies as much as we want. We can do shock armies, we can do guard rifle armies, but if we want to rebuild any of our destroyed tank corps, we're going to have to look at doing things in a certain order, which I'm not sure how I feel about, but yeah, we'll have to deal with that. So, I'm going to take myself off camera again. I just want to talk through that. And I'm going to do all those replacements that I've talked about, right? So I'm going to flip some infantry Axis units to full strength, probably, is what I'll do. And then we will get all the Soviet stuff on the board. And again, probably looking to reinforce, Rostov might not be a bad idea, or it might be a bad idea, depending on how the encirclement could go. Stalingrad is an obvious one. Wouldn't be bad to put some units in Krasnodar. Even Saratov, just to help with the line. We'll see what we can build with those replacement points and how much we can get. But I'll put them on the map and then we'll come back. Okay, we are done with that. The reinforcements and replacements. Something I realize, of course, that I keep making as a mistake as the Soviets is that when the Soviets can move, in whatever limited capacity they've been allowed to move, I keep forgetting to take units out of cities that don't necessarily need to be there, and it causes me some reinforcement snafus a little bit. But it's not so bad, but it's something I need to remind myself as I'm playing. I really need to get those guys out of here. As I said, I reinforced the Axis infantry corps here. I did one up in the north just to make sure that the Soviets have more trouble. If they really think they're going to try to push through and retake Leningrad, they're going to have trouble with that, so that should be sufficient, at least for the moment. In terms of where I put the Soviets, so I put a few rifle divisions down here in Krasnodar, just so there's stuff down there, so it's not an easy grab. I did put another army in Rostov. I flipped to full strength a few armies over in Voronezh, rather than place new guys with the replacements. I put the reinforcements sort of scattered about, but really what I tried to do is I got some units in Stalingrad. We've got some armies, we've got a tank corps. They will defend Stalingrad as to the best of their ability. I also put up in Saratov a rebuilt guard cavalry and some rebuilt tank corps, and I put them back there to be the reaction force, right? So we're going to try to be very smart Soviet commanders, and we're going to say, hey, there's a hole in our line, and yeah, the Axis could go north, they could go south, and we will have this sort of fast reaction reserve force with decent movement points. Go where it seems they need to go, right? So if the Germans start creeping up this way, trying to do a hard curve and encircle, these guys can try to come down and support. If we go wider, obviously they're there in general, and if they decide to go south, these guys can come down and help support Stalingrad, or even look to cut off units if the Axis has overreached themselves. The only trouble is it's such a long distance. Saratov is so far from everything else, but that was like the closest city that I could put them and have that sort of reactionary ability. So we're going to end up using, like for the tanks, if they got 8 movement points, right, it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They can get down here, they can help form a line, but that's about it. And I think that's as good as we'll get here. So 24 replacement points plus reinforcements. I mean, that's a lot of combat points that have been restored compared to the, it's probably like 8 combat points restored total for the Axis with those flips. 4 steps basically being 2 combat steps per step. So 8 compared to 24. I think the manpower difference is clear and evident here, right? So, okay. Well, with that done, we're going to do the airbase segment. The Soviets don't have Air Force to move. They're just going to get their asset markers back. Really, everybody's going to have their asset markers back. In terms of relocations for air, I think most are where they really need to be, honestly. So we need this guy down here to support down there. We could move these guys up. I think I'll do that. Though, how much of a difference that'll make, I don't know, but they're going to help move things forward. I think that our northern air forces, air groups, whatever you want to call them, I think they're fine as is. There's only so many places to go, and I need decent air coverage all along the way, so that's pretty simple. Again, Soviet air, not much to talk about. And then we have the strategic movement phase. Now for strategic movement, we are going to want to try to do some of that with the Axis. Let me get to, yeah, okay. The Axis player is going to roll 2d6, and we're going to figure out how many steps we can rail. That's actually going to be important here, because I would like to, as I said, rail guys out of the Leningrad area and try to get them down near Smolensk and the whole general area. So I'm going to roll 2d6, and we got 8. That ought to be enough. So we're going to move them any distance along in supply Axis controlled rail lines. They can't go adjacent to enemy units, so that's going to be a problem down there in that area in the center with the kerfuffle. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to stop recording for a second, and I'll take care of that. I don't think we're going to do any Axis naval movement. I just don't see where any of that makes sense. The Soviet rail movement, there may be some Soviet rail movement. We'll have to look at that. Naval movement, I don't see much of a reason to do that at this point. I don't think a Soviet amphibious invasion is going to occur because we need to hold on a Sevastopol. And I don't know that the Soviets are going to do any airdropping. We might have to look at that. That might be worth doing maybe with this center area in flux. So give me a moment and we'll do the rail. Okay, we completed our strategic movement. I decided not to do any airdrops because right now the Stavka HQ is a little out of position to really make any use of it. So that was relatively easy. It turned out, because you're looking at, you want to move units by rail, well, they kind of have to be on a rail line. Not everything near Leningrad could actually move where I would have wanted them to. And I looked at a couple other places to try to pull stuff off the line where it made sense. And, well, I still could have conceivably moved more units, but I want to continue to get guys supporting the south. So what I did is I got a couple of units, several units, and I plopped them down here along this rail line. They project Zocs, so I have, under the supply marker is another infantry corps that was there before, plus that. So we've sort of got like some Zoc coverage back here, and we might be able to save that situation. I don't know for certain, but we can certainly try and see what happens. So that brings us to the action phase. So obviously the real meat of the situation, or the video. As usual, we want to look at the chits available for the turn. They're the exact same set as last turn. So the logistics, the Russians get the combat Zhukov, they get Stavka, and they get move. So not terribly effective, but hey, that Zhukov marker could come in handy in the Stavka marker as well, and we could actually do some goodness. I realize I haven't put a lot of units into the Stavka reserve, but there is a tank corps. So hey, we could do something with Stavka, at least as again a reactionary support, maybe with that mobile reserve we've created. Logistics as usual, and then again we've got the combat or move as we decide when they get pulled, and then we get to pick 2 Panzer HQs, and I've again gone with the first and the second. Those are the Panzer HQs that are part of Army Group South right now. I debated on making it the HQ that is in that dangerous Army Group Center situation, which is the 4th Panzer HQ. But I think we could try to salvage that situation. We could pull back a little bit. We could try to knock some stuff loose and fix the line a little bit. Maybe there's a salient forming. We just have to be careful, but I think we can salvage it. And in the meantime, we need to keep up the offensive and keep the Soviets knocked off balance. And I'm going to need the 1st and the 2nd Panzer HQs to do that. So they'll get some extra movement here. We'll get some double movement potentially. We'll have to see how it goes. So, yeah, that's where we're at. And now we're at the phase where the Soviet is going to get to pick 2 initiative chits. At least that's how I read the Fall Blau special rules. I think I'm reading that right anyway, because it says launch Fall Blau, in which case he chooses the first 2 initiative chits, or wait until July, in which case he chooses only 1 initiative on that June turn, which leads me to believe that on this July turn we pick the first 2 initiative chits. So I need to think about what I want to do here, right? I could do a standard move for everybody. I could do a standard combat for everybody. Or I could even just make the first 2 activations the Panzer armies and just get that going right away and then allow everything else to follow. The only thing is, whatever I choose not to pick here, will open that possibility that some of the Soviet stuff will come up, that could come up via Stavka or something and interrupt our plans or keep us from saving that center situation that we've got. I need to think on this, so I'll take myself off camera, think about what I want to do, and then I'll execute those first 2 chits. I'll show you the 2 that I picked, and I'll show you the aftermath of those 2 chits, so that you can just appreciate what it is. If I end up picking the Panzer armies, obviously there are rules around the movement and then combat, or combat and then movement. While we're all familiar with normal combat, normal movement, right? So we'll see you in a second. Okay, well, here we are, for better or for worse. I decided to do a move and then activate the 1st Panzer. And basically what that meant was that, I was able to make some adjustments in a couple of different places that needed to occur. That included up here in the cluster F, that is the center kerfuffle. And at this point, we have a chance to save those guys and even potentially cause some havoc to those shock unit. Well, the shock unit and the other army that came up. It's going to come down to combat and how the rest of these chits play out. When this is over might be when we try to play. Well, I guess the Stavka won't. Yeah, Stavka chit won't really help us here. Okay, as the Soviets anyway. But down in the south, I had to make the decision, right? What do I do? I split the difference a little bit, but only a little bit. So you can see I sent a couple of Panzers up to threaten Voronezh, even though there's a decent number of units there. It could get me into trouble. We'll see. I'm effectively cutting some of these guys. Like I could be cutting some of these guys off soon. Kind of rethinking that move, though. I might have to redo this. I'm not sure. When I did the 1st Panzer activation, I did combat first, and I did that to clear a couple of weak units. And then I surged forward, and I've got, that unit's going to be isolated. I can't quite isolate Rostov because it's got the south rail line, but basically the units are set up to be able to do it next turn, essentially. And it was tough because I was trying to find out, could I get to Stalingrad? And none of the units had enough movement to get to Stalingrad this turn. So it was like, okay, well, even if I got close, I would have local inferiority to the units already in Stalingrad. What my goal, I guess, the short-term goal is to take care of and collapse Rostov if I can, And I'm not sure how well I'm going to be able to do that, but that's going to be sort of the thing I'd like to be able to do. And then once I do that, that should free up enough guys that I can start to make the play down here in the Caucasus, or continue to make that play. At least, being able to be prepared to do what I need to do and get them off the board. But it seems very difficult to do. And the problem is down in the south, I mean, there's really, when we talk about campaign game victory points, there's not a whole lot of victory cities down there. There's one, really, besides Rostov. And getting down there is fine. I still need Stalingrad. Stalingrad's the key. And right now, already, the defense of Stalingrad is very strong. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what do I do here? And I think if I can just get rid of Rostov, clear things up a little bit. The Soviets do have 2 places they can pour reinforcements into on the Caucasus area. They can do that in Krasnodar. They can do that in Grozny. But I'm positioned to be able to cut the rail access to Krasnodar, potentially, because the rail lines get kind of thin down here, and that might enable me to clear up a lot of the stuff that's going on over here, because they need to be able to trace supply on rail, I think. And if I can get down to right here and cut these rail lines with a unit, that's going to clear up a lot of stuff down here, I think. So that's going to be the goal, or at least that's the plan, is to do something like that. The problem will be, even if I get all this stuff down here pretty much cleared out, my problem, well, I got to take Grozny. That could end up being a problem, or an issue to some degree, because I can't put it out of supply. It sits on top of, or against, the east part of the map. I can't cut its supply. So I have to take some bloody attacks to wear it thin, I guess. And if I send units off the map down south without having Stalingrad, I weaken my onboard forces. So somehow I do need to take Stalingrad if I want to do a Caucasus oil victory. If I don't, right, like, what else is there to do here? I could decide to finish Rostov off, head south, take Krasnodar, because that's a victory point city, right? And then just otherwise defend there, right? Create some sort of line over here somewhere, right? And if I have Krasnodar and I have Rostov and I get Sevastopol, I can then just focus on heading up this way. I think this move over here was a poor choice. I might need to redo this. I think I might be running out too far. It's pointless to do that, considering the amount of Soviet forces in the area. But I've got some units here that will need to move up later. We've got some forces we can use. We can start coming up this way. And even just being a problem for the Soviets could be, just the positioning thing. We could still create large pockets. So I just find myself in a tough situation. I'm not sure what the good game move is here. But that's what I did. So we're going to go to the cup. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to change some of these positions, because these guys are still going to be able to count and get in supply, so there's no point. So these guys were here. I'm sorry, here. What do you do, right? Where do you send them? What do you want to? How do you want to do it? Send them here, and then they can be activated with the 2nd Panzer, and they can do more stuff. I think that's probably the better move. Okay, well that's the Case Blue activation. A move and then a Panzer activation could have been better, I guess. Again, I'm just not sure what the right move is. We still have a regular combat that can occur, and then we have the 2nd Panzer activation, and I think that 2nd Panzer activation is going to be pretty important, just because of what we need to be able to do coming up. I don't think the Soviets are going to use Stavka right now. It just doesn't make sense to do, because all we're going to end up doing is putting 1 tank brigade on and then send the tank brigade somewhere. I don't think we can really do that in any way that makes sense. So we'll just we'll go to the cup, and we'll see what happens here. And I pull... Oh, I accidentally pulled 2. Okay. And we pulled... okay, logistics. Well, that's honestly kind of bad for the Soviets because we would have really have liked to do more to cut guys out of supply. That's a real shame. That's a real shame. We still had some potential that we could have put some guys out of supply, but right now, man, what a bummer. That sucks that we pulled logistics when we did. But, on the other hand, that might help the guys that's stuck in the center. So I'm going to take some time off camera. I'm going to do the supply check for everybody, and then we'll be back with more. Okay, well, unless I'm missing something, and I don't think that I am, the only unit or stack that has any sort of supply note was that Soviet unit that got surrounded up here and is isolated. I believe everything else is perfectly fine for supply. That includes the units that are over here, because even the units deepest in this salient can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to a supply depot. So, yeah, the front lines are somewhat stable in this way, and so, not much to say about it. And again, Rostov is still okay. We will have to really get it surrounded appropriately. And I have to look at, the thing about it is we had, there was a question with Riga, like, this a city that has a river port that connects to a body of water, I think has to be surrounded on all sides, or having Zocs on all of the river hex sides or something like that. So I'm not sure, like if I surround Rostov down here, is that enough to have it be out of supply? I'm not sure. I might even have to head down and take Novorossiysk. I can't say anything like that. I might need to take these other eastern ports on the Black Sea to be able to make that a non-usable river port. I don't know. I'm going to have to look at that, but that's where we're at. So logistics is over. Stavka, I might not even end up using the Stavka chit in real terms with the Soviets because I only have the 1 unit in Stavka reserve. And unless I see a really obvious place to make it work, I might just forego even using it. We're going to go to the cup. And we pull the... Okay, well, we get the Axis combat chit, basically. So, Axis gets to conduct combat. Now, where are some obvious places to do combat? Well, we could try to collapse some of these units over here. I'm not sure we need to, but we could. And then we've got our Crimean action stuff that's going on. We are going to want to take care of that. And then we could find a couple of places along the line to attack. We're going to make a big attack here to try to take out those sets of units that are essentially isolated right now. They don't have, they'll become isolated if we can free them. I'm sorry, the Soviet units will become isolated if we can knock out this stack right here. They won't be isolated this turn, but we will have at least, remove the immediate danger, and we can continue to decouple ourselves out of this intense situation. And if there's any other attacks that seem like they might be successful, we can look at doing. But I think up in the north, we're going to be gridlocked for a while. I'm not sure what else that can be done. Even if we did, and this is the funny thing, like even if we knocked holes up here and started getting gaps and started the terrain cost of swamp for infantry or marsh is still 2. So for most infantry, each time they move, they're only moving a little bit, moving a little bit, moving a little bit. It would be 1943, even with a clear front line over here. It would be 43 before we'd be in danger of anything over here, endangering anything over there. So, probably not a lot's going to happen through there in the rest of the game. So, okay, I'm going to go through, I'm going to do combats, and when we come back, I'll talk about the combats that occurred, which ones went well or went badly, and maybe we'll have seen our central issue resolve itself, and then whatever else is going on, we'll have to see. So we'll be right back. Okay, let's review. So decided not to do any attacks down near Rostov. None of them were great odds. I mean, honestly, as the Germans, it's like I don't want to attack unless I've got 4 to 1 odds or better before calculating support, because what ends up happening is the Soviets can put their Air Force marker in, right? And the defender gets much more value out of that than even the planes. And, as one might imagine, it makes it so that even a 3 to 1 odds becomes a 2 to 1 odds, in which case you don't want to attack. And even if you go with like the rule of thumb that 3 to 1 odds are needed, you have to take into account that your enemy could throw in those planes and shift. It's basically a shift usually, because you're going to round in favor of the defender. So it's like a odd shift every time. So I didn't do it down there. Down in the south, we actually got across the straits, the Kerch Straits, which means I could start sending some of these units that could stay in supply across the straits down to Novorossiysk. I'm never going to say that right. Down here, and that would be important because that would further limit the supply that's in the Black Sea, would actually make Sevastopol out of supply, I believe, if I'm reading it right. In any case, I did take one of the other fort hexes here, and I didn't bother with the fort destroyed marker. I just didn't bother. And then I tried to bombard the final hex here. Or I can't remember. Do I put a fort destroyed marker if I take the hex, but I didn't destroy the fort? I don't know. But here, the fort is intact. I tried to bombard. I failed this turn, so that's as good as we get because it makes our air unit done. We could try to hit it with normal artillery. It's just much harder. I'll need a D6 to do it. That was my big, we had a 50% chance, and I rolled a 3, so it didn't work. Until we do that, it's going to be really tough to take Sevastopol. Also, you can see the preview, but don't worry about it. Attacked around here, and it was a BL1 result. Not great. I got to be careful in north, but what I should be trying to do is, if I can, just hurt enough of the Soviets up here that other units have to be moved, that to at least, give a reason to keep fighting up there. So it didn't work out great. But otherwise, hey, we fixed the problem. We fixed the problem, at least for the time being. Unfortunately, this whole little area right here that I have units in is kind of thinned out by advancing after combat into that space, and I had to do it because the Soviets are going to get to go soon. So I had to get them in there, so that we could properly close the gap around those couple of units that surged forward. So this is good, and I just have to be careful to make sure that this whole little area here is properly defended. And once I eliminate those units next turn, I may even want to consider pulling back to this line right here, so that I shorten my line and I get rid of that salient. The opposite idea might be continue to attack here, maybe do an attack here, and shorten my line by eliminating the Soviets. That would be nice. So I don't know. I'll have to think about that. But there you go. So the attacks are complete. I didn't really make that many. Again, across the whole line, there's not, in my opinion, really great odds. So the Axis has to watch their manpower. They don't get a lot of replacements, so they got to be careful. The Soviets can be a little more, brave, I guess, in attacks because they can replace them better, but they have to do it in the right places. So, okay, going back to the chit cup. And we get the Soviet combat Zhukov marker. And as I need to refresh my memory over the last couple of weeks, the combat Zhukov marker feel bad that I even have to look this up, but hey, you know, it's good to get refamiliarized with all this stuff. Okay. Oh, right, okay. So with the combat marker Zhukov, basically all the units that are within the command range of Zhukov, which is 3 hexes, can attack at full supply. All the other Soviet units, if they try to attack this turn, will be considered unsupplied, so a default -2 to all the die rolls. That essentially means that unless we're doing an attack in the range of Zhukov, it's probably not going to be worth it, because the -2, if you look at the combat charts, the Soviet combat chart, -2 makes it that you really can't even bother attacking without very high odds. So it's, you know, very localized ability to attack, but this might be the opportunity for those Soviets to actually attack the weakened line right here, restore access to those somewhat isolated units there, and have eliminated even more German units, making the situation, you know, still pretty bad for the Germans. I think that's what we're going to try to do. I'm going to take us off recording. I'm going to handle these combats, and then the only chits left are Soviet movement and the 2nd Panzer activation, and it might be important which I draw first here, because things could get hairy pretty quickly, I think, depending on how we go. Voronezh is under threat currently. I don't have units right outside it, but I'd be trying to wrap around it if I could, and I think it's feasible that could occur. I'm not sure. Well, we'll find out soon enough. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, well, I meticulously went through the line, tried to figure out where there could be successful Soviet combats, found that, yes, truly, only near Zhukov could this work, and there was 2 attacks along the magical salient here to screw up the Soviet, or the Axis. Unfortunately, I rolled a 1 on the first attack that had decent odds. It was, I think, 4-1, if I remember correctly. Different things, support was thrown in, and basically what it amounted to was that a Soviet assault army took a step loss. And then I tried to attack this hex, the one beside the top Soviet Union here, and that had pretty good odds as well, with the remaining units that could attack, but then I rolled a 2, which was no effect. So essentially, the Zhukov combats could have gone well if I'd rolled a little bit better, but I rolled poorly. And so now those units are probably going to be screwed up. And now we're going to go to the chit pool again, and we get the 2nd Panzer activation. So the last, this kind of sucks, because what's going to happen is we're going to do the 2nd Panzer activation down here. We're going to do some neat, fun stuff, right? But then the Soviet move's going to happen. What they're probably going to do is emergency withdrawals to get away. So I need to figure out some way to get up and around, if I can, to keep these units from being able to get away. So I might say, screw these 1-4s and get these guys snaked up here, and maybe try to get something going where I can at least surround a few more Russian units and just keep exploiting this break in the line and keep getting around units, because I've been able to make, you know, some decent. I knocked something loose up here. Like I've got space to work with, and I could be eliminating units. I just need to keep at it. So I'll come back on camera once I've done the 2nd Panzer activation. We will see what happens. Okay, well, I've made a gamble here, and I did a combat and then move, which in hindsight may have been the best idea. That said, I did manage to get in a situation where these guys could be isolated down the road, these guys could be isolated down the road, and then, you know, Voronezh is a little bit surrounded. We've got a Panzer division that is, he's a little further out there than maybe is really safe, but we don't have to worry about the Soviets attacking. And if I look at the next turn, it will be Axis initiative. So all the Soviets can do is move around our guys. We're going to be able to at least take an action. So we're sort of forcing the Soviets to react to this move, and that's really going to be the challenge here. But anyway, so okay. Yeah. I just realized that I needed to move. Let's see, he was over here. I want him here instead, because he was going to be able to withdraw, and I don't want that to happen. Okay, so now I think I'm done. And the only thing left to do is Soviet movement. So I'm going to make use of this as a final action to get some of these units that are in the cities out. So what we'll do very quickly then is I'll take myself off camera, I'll handle some of these Soviet moves, and then we'll do the Axis Depot Advance together. I don't think German air supply is going to matter. The attrition segment will be easy, and then we'll move on to the next turn. So we'll be right back. Okay, so the Soviet movement was in fact limited, as we said. I was able to use emergency withdrawal to get a couple of units rearranged, and then I took advantage of the fact that I remember I need to get some of these guys out of cities. So our mobile reserve force has started heading west. Excuse my voice there. So they are going to try to improve the Soviet situation and get something locked around here. The river here caused them a little bit of a grief, and they couldn't get over the river one more hex. But they're going to be moving here. Same thing with Stalingrad. What I did was a short move. Basically, I just moved them out of the city so I could dump more guys, and I want them to hold that river if they can. So I could have surged them a little bit further forward, but, well, I guess I could, but yeah, I'm going to leave them there for now. I want to make sure that Stalingrad is properly defended, because basically as long as we can hold Stalingrad as the Soviets, no automatic victory. And we've got a nice little collection of strong cities for reinforcement, so I want to keep that going as the Soviets. As you can see, other moves I made, really just getting some guys, again, out of the cities and then positioning for further defense down the road. And then down here, I did get some guys moving, because we need to now create a new line across the Kerch Straits to protect Novgorod, God, that place. And Krasnodar is empty, but I'm going to put some reinforcements there, because yes, the Axis will be coming probably, and we'll need to figure that out. The whole situation here now is really going to be about, what does the Axis decide to do with its initiative chit? Can it get to where it really wants to be to force an attack that will allow us to have encircled Voronezh properly? Yeah. And I didn't move the units out of Voronezh because there's really nowhere for them to go. They're going to get locked up in Zox by those panzer units. So, I don't know. If the Axis can properly clear up something up here or knock something loose, we could see quite an encirclement, and already this unit will be isolated on the next supply check. So, yeah, this case blue, sometimes I look at the map and I wonder, am I not surging forward far enough? I play so conservatively that I wonder if I'm making the grounds that I need to make. But at this point, I've got such a huge hole in the Soviet lines that I can really just be screwing them up and removing their ability to take action, which is what the Axis needs to do, even in the long term for the game, because the worse shape the Soviets are in general, the harder it will be for them to get into Berlin at the end of the game. So, There we go. Okay, so we're going to go to the attrition phase. Basically, the only net effect of the attrition phase this turn is that these guys are going to go away right here. So the Soviets lost an army, and oops, stuff's falling over. And a rifle division, which isn't, it's not a whole lot, but hey, I mean, you get rid of stuff for free. You get rid of stuff for free. Then we're going to do, well, I guess the attrition segment happens last, but we did it anyway. Soviet markers, or the supply markers, rather, can only go up so far there. Down in Crimea, we need to keep, we could start moving the supply depot, but honestly, like, we need this here to project supply over this way, so that is what we are going to do. And, likewise, we need to supply our units over here, so that's what we got to do. Then we've got this guy who can actually move quite a distance if we are able to. So we'll roll the die to see how far we get to go. I rolled a 1, but this is a good month, so it can at least move 4 hexes. And what we'll get to do is 1, 2, 3, 4. So that improves our supply situation pretty well. Over here, there's really not many places to go. So even if we rolled a 1, we could get to here. This guy's not going to go anywhere. That guy's not going to go anywhere. And the guy up in the far north could, I guess, go somewhere, but I don't think there's any point. So that's just, yeah, okay. You can't see. I should have zoomed out a little bit. There's really, for some of these supply depot markers, there's nowhere to go. They're as far up as they can get and need to be. This guy, we want to get moving east if we can, but he's where he needs to be at the moment, so all is well in the world. German air supply segment, I don't think we need to do that at all. We did the attrition segment. There we go. Victory check. So I think we're still sitting at 32 victory points. Now Rostov is likely, we'll pick that up. Krasnodar is conceivable. Sevastopol is conceivable, and even Voronezh is conceivable here. So we're in the running to pick up at least, hopefully, 4 victory point spots. If we manage to get Maikop and whatever, we can kind of look at, we could conceivably be looking at a victory for the Fall of Blau scenario via that mechanism, but really, if we're playing this as the whole campaign, it may not matter. So we're still at 32 victory points, I believe. So that's as far as we'll worry about for the moment. And the turn advances to turn 14. The Germans are going to get their Manstein shit back, but the Soviets are about to get a lot more reinforcements. Looks like a lot of them are guards, so that may simply mean we take some units off the map and replace them with some nice red guys. We'll see what happens. Okay, so that was turn 13 of The Dark Valley by GMT Games, designed by Ted Racer. We will see you in the next one, guys. If you like this video, hit like. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. If somehow you've come across this video and not seen all the others. And we'll see you next time. Take care, guys. Keep gaming.